They happen throughout history, like this aerial phenomenon, the lights in the sky, or whatever you want to call them. They precede these catastrophes. They're in the records of, I think, Josephus, the lights in the sky just before and just after the destruction of the Second Temple of Solomon in 72 AD. There's all this aerial, what we now call UFO phenomenon. But I'm not convinced it is UFOs. I think there's just so many forms of life here that aren't in our sensory spectrum. We don't hear them and we don't see them, but they're here. Lights they seem to be a form of plasma.
These entities, could it be because of magnetic field disruptions that allow them to take a different state? Or have we disrupted them with our vibration as humanity, sending out a different pulse, and then that awakens them as much as a deep earthquake seismically, that electromagnetic disturbance on oarfish send them to the surface to flee? All right, welcome one, welcome all. So thankful for today, and this is just an amazing day to be alive, you know?
I couldn't agree more. Not many people share our disposition, though.
Yeah, I wonder how our species might deal with this push to transhumanism and the injections that are changing people into a patented species now. And you're looking at this thing going, all right, before it was possibly just transhumanism where you're adding tech to your body, but now it seems there's nanotech injected in your body. That's one leg of species. The alternative route of having those devices embedded in the body is a secondary chain of species, and then the natives will refuse to go with either. When you look back in time, how many different types of hominids were coexisting at the same time? You know, the research I've read is up to 7 hominid species existed at the same time prior to the last magnetic pole shift.
The problem with going with the transhumanist model is that I think it will present resistance to what we'd call natural evolution based on the frequencies of life on this planet. The human form will be kind of like an iPhone, constantly waiting for an upgrade. And if you don't take the upgrade, you'll get, flickering in the panel of your iPhone or something. And I think if you stay with the natural system, even though it's unnatural when you dig right into it, it's just better. You know how I feel, David. I mean, I live in the rainforest in the Talamanca Mountains. I've chosen the natural route. Although I am so deep into AI now, it isn't funny. I was the biggest critic before it ever came out, and now I can't stop using it. And I'm a power user, and what I mean by that is I don't use it through a phone or a browser. I plug the API key right into my independent development environment and use it for writing and editing. And it's, if you are already an experienced writer and editor, it speeds your productivity up 20 to 50 times. It's incredible. It's of no value if the reason you're using it, you haven't already mastered in the normal way. So if you're coming up now as a writer and an editor in the technical field, which is where I make my living, the books I write are more based on the revenue I get from them. You could say that they're more recreation, but I love writing. I love typesetting books. I love all that kind of stuff. And because I've spent my whole life doing it, I mean, when I graduated from journalism school in 92, the computers hadn't even come out yet.
I would agree. And also the previous skills and understanding those, because me doing podcasts, you already have to know how to do a podcast and edit it and tag it before you can even use the AI to language translate it.
I assure you, 90% of the stuff you remember well, you read. Now, when you think of all the podcasts you've listened to, which is probably over 10,000 hours in the last 10 years, you just kind of remember general ideas and standout one-lines. Eyes are open. You're not meditating. You have a book open, but something has to be happening inside of you for you to get the book. And that doesn't happen when we sit down and we watch HBO or we watch our favorite podcast, whatever it is, And I think this is part of what's going on too, why people are becoming so hostile.
As we wrap up 2025, it's a good time to slow down and reflect on the year. If there's one thing we all learned, it's that uncertainty isn't temporary. It's the world we live in now. Waiting for things to go back to normal isn't a plan, it's a gamble. For over a decade, my friends at Noble Gold Investments have helped Americans protect themselves and the people they love by diversifying their wealth in gold and silver. No one knows what 2026 will bring, but one thing's for sure. In an uncertain world, real wealth isn't digital, it's physical, it's lasting, it's yours. So when you're sitting around the table this holiday season, surrounded by family, remember the best gift you can give isn't under the tree, it's peace of mind. So before the year ends, take one smart step toward a safer future. Visit 2030gold.com and get your free wealth protection kit today. That's 2030gold.com. And this holiday season, if you open a qualified account with noblegoldinvestments.com, they're going to send you 10 of these 1-ounce silver rounds. Holiday season's greetings. And on the back, we have the Happy Snowman, which melts at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Silver, 1,763 degrees. It's metals. Your stockings are waiting for these. Head to 2030gold.com. Click on that link in the description box below.
Is that the way we're getting information now is inciting a lot of people. I can't stay more than 15 minutes on X. X is the most vitriolic of them all. It's all people being stomped on. And the worst excesses of this political dichotomy we're in between left and right, which is a complete farce. The only value in it is people smart enough to listen closely, realize there's nobody coming to save us, whether it be Donald Trump in the United States or Mark Carney, who may be Lucifer incarnated in Canada, or Macron. This centralized management system is just not cutting anymore.
When you read a book and then you watch the film, 100% of the time, at least in my personal case, when I go to see the film of the book, I'm like, oh, it's such a disappointment. The main characters look different than your imagination when you've read it. Never lives up to the expectations, even remotely close to what you've put with your mind in that book, reading the published word versus going to see it in a cinema 100% of the time. And see, that was it. When you're talking about the 90s, like traveling in the 1990s, you had your Lonely Planet book with you. There was very little internet. There was no way to look at all these images and places to pair before. Shit, there was hardly any of the infrastructure. You're talking almost 40 years ago. Everybody had books. They were all reading, chilling in hammocks, chilling in coffee shops, reading. Everybody was reading at that time. That computer cafes where you had to get and actually share a computer with all the other people because these people didn't have one. Beautiful being able to use your mind to construct a story that you're reading from somebody else who constructed it from their mind for you to read. Mind and imagination works when you read something versus having it given to you as this is what it is.
It's the work you absorb something when you read that last. And so we have something in common. You speak Mandarin as well. We both lived in Taiwan. I lived in Zhongli, just about 45 minutes south of Taipei. I believe you lived in Taipei, right?
Yeah, and also down in Kaohsiung.
Kaohsiung is the dope, big industrial town.
Changed tremendously. It is one of the nicest go-to becoming blossoming flowers of Asia in terms of cities to go to. All that industry you remember, that's all gone. They removed it with bicycle paths and river walkways and so changed. I mean, I couldn't believe it either after going back there after some years. I was like, what? This is not the same town, especially around on the docks where they've made this massive outdoor area with coffee shops. From an industrial town into a must-visit travel destination.
So to what degree do you think being an expatriate or an immigrant, that experience of stepping out of your American culture and living in another culture, learning their language, and people who never learn other languages, I live in Spanish now, but people who never learn other languages don't realize that a language is a system of thinking. It is a culture. And then you get habitualized by social conditioning to exist within that culture. And then I remember one of the first things I noticed that was extremely eye-opening for me when I was in Taiwan was how everything just worked. I mean, they have high-speed rail systems in Taiwan now. I mean, they just started industrializing in the early 70s. I think the first Japanese satellite factories went in the early 70s. And just how amazing it was there even in the early 90s. And I also read the Lonely Planet Guide to Taiwan, which was the inception of the whole series, which you obviously know. And I remember thinking, like, how do they do all this? And there's no real income tax. Like, all the independent merchants don't really pay an income tax, and civil servants might pay a 6% income tax. Now, if you were to say that in America, like, hey, you could cut your income tax back to 6% if the government just produced the beer and the tobacco. What do you say? And there would be this big philosophical debate about liberty and, you know, communism and the government getting in on the free market. And it's all a bunch of philosophical nonsense. What I noticed in Asia was they simply do what works. Like, there's not a huge philosophy behind it, except its immense practicality. And that was a window into me. I mean, just seeing that, how that country worked with so little public revenue coming in. I remember the Lonely Planet Guide to Taiwan, the early 90s edition. It said that 50 to 60% of the Taiwanese economy was black market. And then when you read that before you go over, you go, oh, this is going to be a hellhole. And you get over there, and it's beautiful. And you're going, well, how do they do it? And there's just always ways to do things. And I, like being born and raised and getting my education in Canada, and then leaving for the first time when I was 26, and then learning Mandarin and living over there and learning that culture, and then spending some time back in Canada. And I never really adjusted to Canada after that Taiwan experience. And I was just itching to get out. And I'd had a child, and, with a woman I could not stay married to. So we got divorced when my son was about 2. But I wanted to be a dad. So I rented a place close to them, and I stayed really significantly in his life. And then as soon as he high school, I said, I'm going to Costa Rica. I'm going to build an earth bag house. You want to come? He said, yeah. He came over on and off for 2 years. We built the houses together. He's coming back over now, I think, to live at the age of 28. There's no future in Canada. I don't know how the US is working out, but unless you're some tech bro who figures out a crypto scam or some indispensable app that everybody jumps on, like Airbnb or Uber, and you're a wage earner of any kind, I don't see how you can live. And I specifically do not understand how in the United States and Canada the real estate prices are staying so high when nobody can buy the houses. The old rule of thumb economists gave was you should not buy a house that is more than 4 times the value of your salary before taxes. So if you make $50,000 a year in 1990, you can't really buy a house over $200,000. Okay. And now it's still, the average median income is about $50,000 in Canada. And the average house is between 800,000 and 1.2 million Canadian, which is about 25-30% difference with the US dollars. And so Gen Z, unless they're given their house down payments, and those down payments are significant to lessen the mortgage payments, they can't buy homes. Then you ask the next logical question: if the demand isn't there because people can't buy them, what's keeping the housing prices up? Do you have any idea? I would suggest it might begin somewhere with companies like Brookfield in Canada, which is euphemistically called the Canadian BlackRock, which is the company of our Prime Minister, Mark Carney. He's the Larry Fink of Brookfield, and they're doing the same thing. And there's all this graph now. It's like, David, like we reversed roles. What we were told the world was when you and I were younger and we started traveling, and we had our bubbles burst when we started traveling. But what we were told the world was, a cesspool of exploitation and corruption. It's just not true. Central America there's corruption here for sure. It's part of Latin culture, but it's just way worse in Western Europe and North America now. It's like we've become the worst. We're the new Mexico City. What do you think?
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. And another thing to keep going on with this incredible home prices or house prices, the insurance industries just keep raising rates indefinitely. And I had a chance to talk to my insurance agent here because my rates went up some 20% from last year for the homeowners insurance. And I was like, whoa, what is going on? I have had zero claims. And she's like, I know, but it's just because materials cost more, labor costs are higher. So these companies need to cover their costs. So they're raising everybody's rates because everything is costing more. And I said, well, okay, well, then this is the final. When's the next time you think they're going to raise rates? Because she was saying generally about every 3 to 5 years, you'll get an increase. And she said, it's not like that anymore. As far as we can see, the rates are going to be rising every single year from this point forward without the actual percentage attached to the end of that statement. But put that in perspective for a second. So if you're scraping nickels by because you had to, buy something that's out of your range anyway, and you were penny pinching to make those payments, then we get into the point where how do they start harvesting homes from people? Well, they just continually raise the insurance rates. Your insurance going from, let's say, $1,000 a year for homeowners insurance to $12,000, which has happened in many a place, especially in Florida. They're getting like a 10x increase over the last 3-4 years in terms of their insurance rates per year.
How do people afford that?
They don't. They just end up selling their house, and who's there to buy it at pretty much market value or a little bit under? BlackRock, Blackstone, Citadel. At least those are the bigs in America here. And it seems that there's this never-ending octopus tentacle grab to pull all properties in under general management, because then BlackRock or whatever, Blackstone, Citadel, they'll buy those properties, turn them over into rental units, and then they'll turn up the rent on that too to almost unaffordable rates. 3-bedroom house used to be like $850 or something. Now you can't touch that thing for under like $2,600 or $2,800. The same price, the exact same home, say 8 years ago, 9 years ago, would have been $850, and now it's $2,800. So even if on the rental side of things, it seems like there's this excruciating milking of everybody's wealth. Auto insurance rates keep increasing as well. My auto insurance rates went up 10% this year. And I was like, wait a second, I've had 0 tickets ever. I got no accidents ever. And she's like, well, you're driving a car that's 9 years old. It might be harder to find parts for that, and this and that and the other. I'm like, it's a truck. I take care of it. Any kind of new automobile you'd want to purchase is up around the $40,000, $50,000 range. I mean, you really can't get into a new auto for under $30,000 to $35,000. And I remember my grandparents telling me, and my parents saying, we didn't even spend that much on a whole house. When they bought their first home, it wasn't $40,000. This is just for a car. And then because it's new, your insurance premiums are even higher, and can't see how much longer people are going to be able to continue to stay in this machine.
Before we get into the causes for it, let me just focus you back on Taiwan and ask you, make the same analysis of Taiwan, like Gen Z in Taiwan. Can they buy a home? Do they have a little bit of breathing room? Is there a hopeful future for them? Does it feel like the 1970s in Taiwan?
It does. We have a home in Taiwan. It's a 3-floored home. You know how they are there, 3 floors. Plus we had the balcony up top for drying clothes and thing. If you want to say that's a roof, 4th floor roof. Yeah, as long as the parents would give the money for the child to go ahead and purchase an apartment or something, although they're very pricey compared to American homes, there is that hope and optimism that greater things are coming. Walking around, everybody just thinks that this is the upcoming stage. Like, you got to have a hopeful population for things to start growing and moving. This is their golden time, right?
Over here in Central America, there's a tremendous optimism as well. I don't know why, but I was somehow able to see this 10, 12 years ago, and I made my plan. And when I left Canada, I came over here in October of 2014. So I've been here 11 years now, married 6 years, just getting around to getting my residency. Actually, I went for my matrimonial interview last week, which will allow me to work over here too. And I'll have it in a couple months. And there's a booming tech sector in San Jose, and the salaries are pretty good. I mean, I could do, if I get an American company, a satellite company over here, if I take over their communications department as the lead technical writer, I could be looking at 80 or 100 US, and income tax here is about 6%. Now I'm presently working, I have my own company, my own thing. I tooled this AI that I work with to do grants and tax credit applications. So the research and development tax credit with the IRS, I do that. I do the scientific research and experimental development tax program in Canada. And here's the thing, when you're living here, there's no income tax on money made outside of Costa Rica. Now, the way I set myself up, I went to an area that's not really zoned, although we have electrical posts up to where I live, and then they stop, and then you just go into thousands of square kilometers of raw mountainous wilderness, the UNESCO heritage site known as the Talamanca Mountains. But I don't have property tax. My bills are Starlink, and I have two satellite dishes for Starlink at $46 US a month, one for the back house, one for the front house. My electrical bill, which is about $100 a month, and then whatever food I have to buy. I want people to just digest that as they go through what they're going through. And I don't know, they seem to be incentivizing people to leave North America now. You see it all over social media, why I'm leaving Canada, why I'm leaving the United States, and so on and so forth. What do you think is causing this, with the two parameters being natural forces and deliberate surreptitious collapse? Where do you come between those two polarities? Is this the natural outcome of Western society, that we fall apart, we become too habituated, we can't function anymore, we're lazy? Or is this a controlled demolition through the financial system and various government policies, including urban policing and all the other stuff we see going on?
Well, you'd have to go back through history and see if things are rhyming or matching. I mean, even if you go back to the 1600s during the Maunder Minimum, when there was a full collapse of export, economy, population, was the low solar activity and the lack of crop production really just only that was the main cause? Or was exactly what is happening today happening then? So when they came into the disruption in food production, nobody could work together. The versions of
Yeah.
history that we're given, are they accurate even? Because we don't know even the world in 1640, yet they tell us they know everything about 8,000 years prior. It does seem to me, just as a caveat, that if you go through history and you look at what not just the superpowers themselves, but the actual reserve currency of the planet had been, it's always moving. And wealth
Mhm.
always moves, money moves. It always moves into new areas after old areas are saturated. But what have they done routinely when old areas get saturated? They're destroyed and then they're rebuilt. And it seems this 80-year clock of destruction and rebuilding just moves around the planet like a fog that moves across a swamp somewhere and sticks and thickens. And then it's wispy at the edges. I just see this repeated again and again. I do think it's purposeful, where those that have eyes to see and ears to hear are getting advance warning, and perhaps they're the ones that are leaving and are meant to leave. Because everywhere you look, they're talking about 15-minute cities, lack of travel, 1 or 2 flights a year.
Yeah.
You're not going to own anything. Obviously, that means that every bit of your physical assets are going to be stripped from you. And they're telling you in advance, this is the plan. If you don't get out of the way, like in 5 minutes, there's a truck coming at 60 miles an hour. Or a high-speed train, you better get off the track. We're telling you in advance. And what's the event that could trigger that to shift the wealth into the new system start that will be accepted globally? And then we'll see that separation on purpose, no less.
Have you ever read Bramley's The Gods of Eden?
No, I've heard several people mention that I should, but I haven't.
Yeah, you'd really enjoy it, actually. It's a completely different take on the UFO phenomenon. But I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. So before all of these calamities, like the plague and the fire of London and all of these things throughout history, Bramley documents through unbelievable research, and this would have been pre-internet research. I think he published it in, I think, 1988. But it's become the gold standard in this kind of literature. Basically, there's this element before these things happen, close to before they happen, which is like a one-to-one match for the aerial phenomenon in New Jersey and other parts of the world with whatever those things were, whether they were next generation technology in the form of drones or what have you. But lights in the sky, strange mists appearing. And last year or early in 2025, they had the strange mists as well. I had a friend get caught in one of those, let's call it a kind of manufactured fog. He was in Florida in an RV. He was originally from Virginia. And then he sent me a picture of his face, and it had all blistered up and everything. This was not a normal fog. And all of these things that we see going on right now, they happen throughout history, like this aerial phenomenon, the lights in the sky, or whatever you want to call them, the Chris Bledsoe lights. And I'm not sure they're positive things, to be honest with you. They precede these catastrophes. They're in the records of, I think, Josephus, the lights in the sky just before and just after the destruction of the Second Temple of Solomon in 72 AD. There's all this aerial, what we now call UFO phenomenon, but I'm not convinced it is UFOs. I think there's just so many forms of life here that aren't in our sensory spectrum. We don't hear them and we don't see them, but they're here. You know, my Muslim friends say they're jinn, and when you think about it, the jinn are a smokeless fire, which could be plasma, and these lights in this autonomously moving lights they seem to be a form of plasma. I can't help but notice the correlation between what's going on now. It's like this other dimension around human life only shows itself at times of great calamity and great change. It doesn't have to be global. It can be regional, because usually they're seen in a regional context. And it just gives a whole new context to the idea of the forces that are shaping and governing this human experience on this planet. You have any insight into that?
Well, it sounds like you're describing an oarfish at depths before earthquakes that comes up to very shallow water, like oarfish. They're very common around in Asia and Pacific, that before large earthquakes, these long fish that look like an oar or a paddle come to the surface. And that's an omen for a lot of people when they see these, because they've been disturbed out of their natural environment. So if you think
Wow.
about that, these entities, could it be because of magnetic field disruptions that allow them to take a different state? Or have we disrupted them with our vibration as humanity, sending out a
Yeah.
different pulse, and then that awakens them as much as a deep earthquake seismically, that electromagnetic disturbance on oarfish send them to the surface to flee? I mean, if we awaken something through our consciousness here, the vibration literally we're putting out that disturbed those either sleeping entities or the ones they were hiding but have been driven out of their spaces due to us. And also maybe it's
Yeah.
a combination of weakening magnetic field and the way that humans are using their minds to vibrate this reality. Because as you look around it, if you think about how it seems to be getting darker and darker every day, unless you're using your mind to say, I'm a hot air balloon, I am floating above that, I am looking down at that darker vibration. If you're to
Yeah.
get caught up in the daily workings, you are going to be, enveloped in that soup. These are very well referenced also in tapestries of Europe in the 13 and 1400s, just at the same time that the Sporer minimum was occurring. This is very low solar activity in the 1300s that again caused widespread devastating crop losses. Was the end of I think it was the Yuan dynasty in the late 1200s in China as well,
Yeah.
overlapped with that same period that they saw a lot of these orbs and lights. And being the Christian era time, it was God, it was angels, but they have a lot of these same floating objects. Again, same sort of setup, depleting
Yeah.
magnetic field because of incredibly low solar activity. Do we really know between 1250 and 1350 AD, like how the world was being structured, if the church was running around burning people alive and trying to control an inquisition starting at least at that infancy point? How do you think the world would be vibrating? Again, we come into this, is it a disturbance pattern of humans themselves that awaken these lights that come out in certain magnetic field conditions that allow them to be seen?
Yeah.
Fingerprints across time.
So what do you think about the future of Taiwan, and what would be the consequence of Beijing absorbing Taiwan? And do you think it's justified? Now, we both know the history, right? I mean, the Fujianese went over there on their own. They never had any support from Beijing. Soldiers weren't sent over to help them with the headhunting tribes, the Polynesian tribes that lived on Bella Formosa. They made their peace with the tribes. They etched out a civilization. Then the Japanese came in 1895, and again, not a peep from Beijing to come and help them. And then the Japanese are expelled after World War II in 1945. Chiang Kai-shek and the Nationalist Army come over in, 49, and basically do that sort of hang the head from electrical poles in Gaozhong. And then we crawl up to 2025, and Beijing is saying that Taiwan is the property. There's this element of the story which is about veracity in the claim, right? Is Taiwan really an adjunct of Beijing? By its 300-year history, or a little bit more than 300 years, no, not really at all. But putting that aside, because that's more of a Western argument, right? And again, we'll die on principles where practicality could save us. It's part of the flaw of being a Westerner. What do you think the real consequences of Beijing absorbing it would be, and would the lives of the Taiwanese change that much?
Well, again, you have Formosa. That's a great. Then you'd have to step further back into when those from Europe arrived, and it was a full-fledged society working on its own. I mean, we can go back 600, 800, 1,000 years prior, and it still was disassociated. So, I'll play with you on that mind experiment. But it depends how Beijing might try to take Taiwan. If it's forceful and it involves missiles and invasions, you're talking about collapsing part of the world economy, because the chip manufacturing over there, at least for this iteration, these next 5 to 10 years, this is the center of the epicenter of the high-tech AI, robotic drone surveillance movement on the planet. Like every country that is on board with this digital ID, total surveillance, including bringing the world up to this, envisioned future of everything that is running autonomously on wired signal, from the micro nano robots all the way up to something that's in your house cleaning, and everything in between, take it above your home into the aerial space, everything that's going to be AI controlled, from airlines and everything in between. It all needs to have these chips. So if you're talking about disruptive event, if Beijing were to go in there forcefully, then everything that has been planned for this movement to 2030 and beyond ceases and stops on a dime and does not move one iota forward. Actually, it will move decades back, because people will start to wake up, because that tech will start to fail, because there'll be no replacements for it. And how outdated tech even becomes after 5 years. Production facilities won't be back up for more than a decade, right? So in the interim, something's going to have to try to pick that up. But we will stall technologically where we sit today if that were to happen forcefully. If they try to bring them in under some sort of economic plan, the Taiwanese still aren't going to go along with it. Politically, they're very strong. Like, we reject that.
So this is the journey that China's on, but I'm completely okay with a multipolar world. And I find the West now, and particularly the United States, to be one of the most imbalancing factors in the world right now, with its kind of unwarranted pugilism. I mean, even if the darkest secrets or conspiracies about DARPA technology are true, even if that's true, I'm not sure America could win a war now against Russia or China, and definitely could not win a war against Russia, China, and Iran. So I don't know why there's not more compromise.
Yeah, well, China's supposed to be the global economic superpower by 2032. And if they were not trying to go away from using dollars, let's say we reverse the clock back to, say, 2008, the Olympics, everything was rolling in China. If they were not going to come to a secondary system, they would be left alone. But since they are trying to take and move to a new global standard based on metals, precious metals, along with natural resources traded amongst their trade partners, these behemoths are too big to contend with. So how is this going to be defeated? Because a direct conflict one-on-one on a multi-front war, I just can't see who can win on a multi-front. Japan tried that.
Just to address the money issue for a while, And your timing is spot on, citing the 2008 Olympics and the last normal with China's position in the world using the US dollar. My retort to that would be, can you really blame them after what was pulled with the AAA nonsensical mortgage bonds that were pushed out all over the world and almost collapsed the global economy in 2007, 2008? And it was such a vulgar thing to do, only like 15, 18 years after winning the Cold War, that, okay, we're going to do this now, and who's going to stop us? I find it very hard to believe, The Big Short, the movie aside, that this was not a known thing, that these bonds were worthless, and that, these government subsidized mortgage issuing companies like Fannie whatever, and that this was not an organized internal Ponzi scheme, and literally hundreds of billions of dollars left the United States. And that was the beginning of the fleecing and the looting in the United States. And it's been nonstop looting ever since. There's and we're always promised justice. This is the big talking point of the Trump administration. They tell us, oh, a scandal with 100 million or hundreds of millions of dollars have gone missing in the Ukraine Defense Fund that has come from the United States. I mean, is anybody really surprised? I mean, when are we going to stop pretending this is the new normal? And when are we going to wake up and realize that the biggest enemy of North Americans are in their own capital cities, Ottawa and Washington? And this seems to be by some global decree, especially the United States and secondarily Canada, because, I mean, really, those were the two best countries from World War II until this collapse began. Everybody wanted to go to America or Canada. And, the short list after that might have been Australia. But basically, a British satellite run under British common law. Everybody wanted to go to it, okay? And it's almost like we tore down that reputation ourselves. That's what's so demoralizing about this, is that nobody did this to us. We did it to ourselves. We did it with George Bush Jr. We did it with Cheney. We did it with Rumsfeld. We did it with Hillary Clinton. We did it with Barack Obama. And we're doing it with Trump. Some of the things going on in the Trump administration are just mind-boggling. Why would you not send the Secretary of State over to negotiate in the Middle East? Why, or Ukraine to negotiate with Russia? Why is Trump sending Jared Kushner? Why do we need an unappointed, untitled, non-fixture of the government, basically a private sector entity, who's the son-in-law of the sitting U.S. president and blooded-in member of, I think, what is fast becoming the most diabolical cult on the planet, which is Chabad Lubavitch? None of it makes any sense to me.
I'd like to respond to the reason that it did happen and the awareness came at 2008. I think that was the wake-up call to most of the world, because at that time there was no second place to go to. A lot of these countries saw what was happening. They knew what was happening, but there was nowhere to go to exit those bonds. If you did, you were penalized, as we see Japan get penalized by trying to dump the bonds. There's still some power that remains within that. You dump the treasury bonds, your currency absolutely gets run through a pool full of great white sharks, and whatever comes out the backside, not chewed to bits, that's the rest of your currency if you decide to mess around and exit an enormous amount of our treasury bills. But at that time, it was even more so. The trading amongst these nations, they did have some agreements, likely, but nothing like today with full-on accords and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization that's fully now with fledged members. I think there's 11 now. The gold exchanges that are setting up across the planet. So everywhere from Dubai over to Shanghai, Moscow, Kazakhstan, and Astana, the UAE, there's several places, even in Switzerland, where you can redeem your gold through the BRICS line trading nations. Like, that did not exist in 2008. Had it, I would say retrospectively, they would have dumped, and we would be where we are right now, but probably a little further had they had the chance to dump, because they wouldn't hold so much as they do now. But there was nowhere for them to exit at that point, and we knew that. Fully took advantage of it. And I would just leave it there as well. But I do thank you for your time tonight. So thank you for spending your valuable time right here listening to our ideas. If you agreed or disagreed with anything you heard tonight, or you have something else to add into the idea, because that's what these conversations are about, are like bringing other ideas into the fold, please leave them in the description box below the video. I will read them. Bruce will read them. So if you can't come back to you, for next month, so if you have any questions that you would like us to talk about, please put those there as well. I'll make a list for our next conversation. But Bruce, any last words?
Well, what you said at the beginning, wake up every day with gratitude.
We'll see you next time. Bye for now.